Find out what you're good at and then study even more of that. Try to become even better because you're probably good at something that you have a tendency to be good at, meaning that you're already better than 90% of people or 99%. And then if you invest more time in that because you have passion and already a good starting point, you will become better than a million people.
Alrighty, hello everyone, and welcome to the Deal Maker Show. So today, very exciting, founder that we got joining us. We're going to be talking about a lot of gaming, and again, founder turned investor. We're going to be talking about both sides of the table. He's also worked at larger corporate firms, so I think that every single aspect, we're going to be covering it on the show today. Very inspiring. We're going to be talking about the building, the scaling. Also getting incredible exits, also incredible returns on investments. And again, brace yourself for quite the episode. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest today, Henric Suuronen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. And that was almost perfect pronunciation of my Finnish last name. So thank you for that.
Amazing. Well, born in the 80s in Finland. So give us a walk through memory lane. How was life growing up over there?
Yeah, so to those of you who haven't been in Finland, it's of course a cold country. So we have our snow, at least used to have snow before global warming. But yeah, in the 80s we had snow. And as a funny story, my birthday was actually I've turned 45 last Friday. And when I grew up, usually on my birthday there was snow. And now with global warming, there's not even snow on the southern coast for Christmas. So that's how it has changed. But maybe we can talk about global warming on a different podcast than yours. But anyway, so yeah, I grew up in Finland, and in Finland is kind of like maybe known for Nokia, ice hockey, and Santa Claus. And if, in case you don't follow ice hockey, it's kind of like our national sport, so everyone plays it. But in later years, also gaming, especially mobile gaming, and I understand also why, because it's of course dark outside and quite miserable. So people like to then spend time inside, especially in the winter or in the fall when it's wet, playing games. And that's also what I did when I grew up. So I played mostly on Amstrad. I didn't have, my friends had a Commodore 64. Unfortunately, my parents bought the wrong machine, which was a little bit a downer, but because on Commodore 64, there was much more games than on Amstrad. But in that time also came, of course, the Nintendo 8-bit, and my friend had Super Mario, so played Super Mario a lot. And when I say a lot, it means 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day. And later, my brother got a PC, 486 40 megahertz. I played Mortal Kombat. Then later, Doom, if you remember Doom, the first-person shooter game. That was also kind of my first touch of kind of multiplayer, which is quite important later in my career, is because some PCs started getting modems, if you remember, and you would dial up over the phone line and play against your friends, and that was an absolutely incredible experience. I would say that was sometime in the 90s, but yeah, growing up in Finland was interesting, playing a lot of games, playing ice hockey, and of course also a little bit of studies. And my mother actually, she was getting very worried when I played so much that when I went to sleep, I closed my eyes and under the eyelids as units moving because they were kind of like etched to my retinas from playing too much. But I think this period actually is incredibly important for my career because I played every single game there was on PC pretty much. And of course I came from a poor family because my dad died when I was 8. So I pirated all of those games, and I'm ashamed of saying it, but I think it was actually an important education for my career, that if you played every single game, you got a very good knowledge of what are the mechanics, what are the things that makes people like a game and coming back to a game. And I think later in my career, when I actually designed games for a living, before becoming an investor, all that knowledge that I gained from playing all those hundreds or thousands of games in the 80s and 90s and early 2000 comes into use. And that's a skill I still use as an investor, because you can talk pretty much about any game with the founder. So it's super important. But yeah, it was playing games and also, of course, playing a little bit of ice hockey. And as I'm not good enough ice hockey player, I'm happy that I was good enough in mobile games later.
Well, I mean, it's I mean, it's amazing because as you were talking and you were sharing some of those games, it gave me unbelievable flashbacks. I remember going to the internet cafes to play Counter Strike and stuff like that. I mean, it's incredible days, no? I mean, in your case, Finland, once it was time to work, you went at it with Nokia, and you went there on different divisions, and eventually you ended up joining the gaming unit, and that's kind of like what changed everything. So, what happened there, and how do you say? Would you say that that catapulted you into the gaming space?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I started a master's in software engineering, and Nokia had, this was maybe 2001 or 2002. They had a recruitment fair at my university, and they just picked me. Okay, that we hire you as a engineer on the communicator team. So if you remember, there was a Nokia phone that you opened up and it had a full keyboard. You can have Excel, Microsoft Word, and all. And this is 2002, 2003. We're talking about. So I was a programmer on that and working specifically on a calculator app. But I quite quickly realized that I'm a really bad programmer. And and as you realize that you're working in a, and this is before iPhone, okay? So pretty much the hottest company out of Europe, which was Nokia, they had a 43% market share in mobile phones. And I worked there, and I thought that, okay, I'm going to get fired because I'm such a bad programmer. And one day in the cafeteria, I saw a couple of colleagues. They were shooting on something on their mobile phones, and this was a Series 60 device, so the first device from Nokia where you could access the kind of through an API the camera feed, and they were shooting mosquitoes on their digital mosquitoes on the screen, and that got my brain kind of rolling. That, oh shit, that what if you would make a game where you kind of can record over Bluetooth the color of your friend's shirt with a matching on a camera of the color, and then you would kind of be urban shooting game, and if you match the color of what you recorded, then the other phone vibrates as you being hit. And this kind of game idea rescued me from, I think, getting fired as a programmer, because when Nokia saw it, or some executives saw it, they said, "Come and work at the games unit." And so I moved to the capital of Finland and the headquarters of Nokia, and joined the games unit, which had been rolling for a couple of years, and they had lost hundreds of millions on the Engage. If you remember, there was a kind of gaming dedicated phone by Nokia in early 2000s, and they tried to kind of relaunch it on all Nokia phones. And that's when I joined on something called the Arena, which was a kind of a connected layer on top of the mobile phones. And I love that because a whole thing for me growing up was that games are, if you play single player, you're isolated and you don't meet people. And I was, like many teens in a kind of like their teenage years, a little bit afraid of talking to girls or talking to people. But games allowed you to, especially multiplayer games, and that's very important for the mobile part, is that you can play a game and then kind of you have a shared interest, and then it's easier to talk to someone. And when I kind of joined the Nokia Games team on specifically on the Arena connected gaming part, I was like, there's no problem with not having a modem to your PC because every phone is connected. So all the games you could do, is it even a simple game like Snake, you could think about, okay, what's the multiplayer version of it? Because every phone is connected. And this is also the time when flat rate flat rate internet connections started rolling out in some countries, and not in all in 2005 and 2006, but they started slowly that, okay, data is going to be bigger than phone calls, data is going to be bigger than SMS. And now it's of course very easy to say, yeah, that's of course going to happen. But if you go back to 2003, 2004, that was not the case. And but when you worked at Nokia, you realized, okay, that's actually going to be the case. And a lot of this connectivity back then, and especially with games, I thought that, hey, if you design games that are connected from the get-go, uh, you will have a better business, you will have a better retention profile for your users, and ultimately also monetize better. And so on the business side, but then also on the kind of like, let's say, personal side, that, or let's say good for humankind side, is that we can bring people who are introverts together, and they can maybe find their wife, their girlfriend, or their friends through a game. And Nokia did, during my time there, some incredible games like Pathway to Glory, for example, a battle game with incredible features that still some iPhone games don't have. 15
I
years
remember
later.
even
But
Nokia, one of their strategies to do user acquisition back in the day. I mean, my very first phone was a Nokia, and I remember the playing that snake game like crazy. It was just like so addictive, and at least in Spain, everyone wanted a Nokia to be able to play, the games that they had, which was a an incredible way to acquire new customers. Now, in your case, what really cemented you in the gaming space was digital chocolate, which was the obviously you've done tons of stuff, afterwards, but it was like that pivotal moment for you in your career, being able to join digital chocolate and being able to be part of the lives of 3 million people that were playing, some of those games on a daily basis. So how was that journey like, really landing on digital chocolate? You spent there a few years, and then obviously Wuga, which became the most immediate step before you became an entrepreneur. So walk us through what happened there.
yeah, so I was working at Nokia on a successful project to a French gaming company called Gameloft, and I actually got a acquisition, like a job offer to move to London. And I told my girlfriend, and of course we cried and everything, that I would move abroad and all that stuff. And then Digital Chocolate had just bought a Finnish company called Sumea Interactive, which loosely translates to Fuzzy Interactive, a mobile gaming company. And Digital Chocolate is founded by Trip Hawkins, who also founded Electronic Arts, that you probably saw just got sold to PIF for 55 billion. So
Yeah.
one of the most epic. This was his kind of third company, Digital Chocolate, and he had bought the Finnish company. It was very high profile and raised tons of money. And Digital Chocolate Finland office, which eventually hired me. So, or they heard that I was going to London to a competitor, and they made a competing offer. So I went with them, and very happy because I then joined directly under Ilkka Paananen and Mikko Kodisoja, who later, of course, are known as the founders of Supercell, makers of Clash of Clans. And I have to say that I was 4 years at Digital Chocolate. That's where I got my MBA of gaming. That you kind of how to make games, how to make business out of games, how to think about how to monetize, how to get virality. And I probably made 50 games, maybe 55. I haven't done a proper calculation of, and usually as a product manager, sometimes a game designer, sometimes even a little bit of art stuff, and anything kind of except coding. Like I said, I'm a bad coder, so luckily we had great coders to do that part. But I designed games and then kind of how to make them products. And in 2010, that's kind of like when my pivotal moment in my career comes. So prior to that, I actually had moved to Barcelona, to the Barcelona office of Digital Chocolate, and made some iPhone games. One point of time, we had 15 games in the top 100 in the same time on iPhone at Digital Chocolate. In the same time, 15 out of 100. Of course, Steve Jobs also showed some games we worked on stage, which was quite cool. And but in 2009, 2010, this new platform, Facebook Canvas, came. So people used to use Facebook on the web browser. Of course, now not maybe so much, but back then, and Zynga, of course, was the big company on Facebook gaming. But Digital Chocolate and I was tasked to, okay, come up with how do we enter Facebook. And I made a couple of games. First, Tower Blocks did really well, like 200,000 players per day. Did a kind of a UFC type of game, MMA Pro Fighter, also a couple 100,000 players. But the smash hit that changed my career is Millionaire City, so a city builder, a little bit like, let's say, a Sim City on Facebook. And that game was done in Barcelona with a team of 6, out of which I was one, and the product manager, and also some of the game design. And and that was done in 6 months, and it went very quickly in 3-4 months to 3 million players per day. And after that game, and it was the biggest game not done by Zynga or in the US. So it was the biggest game in Europe, and or done in Europe, and 3 million press day. And after that, I never needed to apply for a job again. So after that, it was all the other corporates I did was a headhunted. But I left then in 2010 and joined Wuga in Berlin, so an early kind of like a Facebook game company as well, and that went incredibly well. So we grew during my tenure there as head of studio. It grew from roughly 2 million players per day to 11 million players per day, and we raised also a $24 million round of financing to that company. We made, for example, the biggest puzzle game before Candy Crush called Diamond Dash, which also name I invented because if you have alliteration on mobile, so the same letter in the both words, you usually get higher CTR, which is also easy to prove with performance marketing tests. But the Diamond Dash maybe was back then the biggest hit. But in 2011, and that goes my path to being an entrepreneur. Uh, I read the Steve Jobs biography book, and I was like, okay, sometimes you got to get out of your comfort zone and do your dreams and chase your dreams. And a little bit of a cliche, but that's exactly what happened. And me and a couple of other people I had worked with, partly at Nokia before, we started talking. Let's make our own gaming company, and let's go to Asia. And the reasoning for Asia was that back in 2011, 2012, when we created the company, Asian games had something called live operations, so that you would push new events inside the game on an hourly basis or daily basis. Uh, Western games would do it once a month or once a quarter. In Asia, they would do it on a daily or even hourly basis. So I wanted to learn how to do that. And it's a specific type of system you have to have in place. And the second part was we started seeing like this very advanced item economies, digital item economies in games. And this is something we start now seeing consumer apps in, like Duolingo, if you follow that on the App Store, is that it's not just that you buy a missing currency or a missing item. You maybe grind yourself to a missing item or two of them, and then you can combine them and they become even better item. And then you can rinse and repeat that almost endlessly. And this creates a much more stronger compulsion loop to the player, but also kind of drives motivation and desires that I want to have that sword because it's so hard and to get it. Of course, you can also pay for it, and it can be quite expensive. And this, of course, then trickles down to kind of like the LTV of that game and how much you can kind of run a business on that game. But I wanted to move to Asia to hire people from Japan, China, and Korea who were kind of like the pioneers in this type of games. Get them, move them to Singapore. They teach me, and we work together, and we create these games from Singapore to the world. And we launched then with my own company that we then launched in 2012, 2013. We raised a $3 million round of financing from same investors as Spotify. And we launched a game called Heroes of Honor, where we put everything I knew from Western game making and then learned from the Asian game makers together in one game. And the result was, for example, that we had users who spent tens of thousands of dollars inside the game, and that was not possible in Western-made games. And then we ran live operations on an hourly basis, let's say 8 a day. And this is super important how this continued because the journey was quite quick. So I was from founder to exit was 3 years, very quickly. I mean, we sold the company then in 2014 for 32 plus 68 million US dollars to the Candy Crush company. So they had just IPO'd following the success of Candy Crush for roughly 6 billion. And they were interested in Asia and Asian game making, and they were interested in more deep item economies, exactly like I described, that you could have items you grind for days or years to get, and then you combine them to a better item. And Candy Crush didn't have anything like that. And then they were interested in this live operations part that you would be able to push events inside of Candy Crush quickly. So they acquired my company, and then in I think it was July 2014. And
Which
after
is
that, I was
something interesting. There was a knee surgery, and how not even a knee
yeah, yeah,
surgery got
yeah.
in between you and getting the deal done. So I guess first, how did the initial interaction with King happen, and also tell us about that knee surgery, and that airplane.
Good question. So yeah, so in 2014, uh, let's say 2 months before the company was acquired, I flew from Singapore to my hometown of Finland. I say that it's known maybe for mobile games and ice hockey players, but also they're known for good surgeons. So even David Beckham, I think, when his Achilles heel or something was the tendon, sorry, was broken, he flew to my hometown to get surgery. But anyway, so I flew there for a knee surgery. So I had a cartilage problem in my knee, and I had not been able to run for 8 years. And at the tech conference, actually, I found a lead to a experimental knee surgery that would extract stem cells and put them under your kneecap and grow new cartilage. So I went through that procedure and happy now I can run again because of that. But as I was recovering on the second day of recovery, I suddenly get a message from the CEO of King asking that, hey, can I take a phone call? And I took the call and said that, hey, can you come to Stockholm tomorrow? And bear in mind, I had had the surgery 2 days before. So I said, no, I can't. I just had a surgery. I'm not allowed to be on a plane for 8 weeks. And then he said that, but what if I told you that I want to buy your company? And then I was quiet for a while and said that, yeah, maybe I can somehow get this done. Of course, the flight from Finland to Stockholm is just 1 hour. But yeah, so we then flew all the founders to Stockholm and quite quickly struck the deal in the following 2 months in July 2014.
So one thing that happened too is, once the deal with King was done, they ended up getting acquired too, and that actually helped by Activision, and that actually helped for you to be able to get out of the deal, and that kind of like catapulted you into this world of startup investment. So you were doing some angel investments prior, here and there. But how do you go from being a founder and doing some angel investments on the side to then deciding, hey, I kind of like want to dedicate this next chapter of my life and career to being on the other side of the table?
No, that's a good question. I think as I started this talk was that pivotal things in my life was kind of playing all these games, pirating them from let's say 6 year old to 20-year old, playing all the games again, kind of get the mechanics in your head. Then later work for corporates, see how business is done, how games are done. And that was mainly digital chocolate, maybe a little bit of Nokia. And then being an entrepreneur, of hiring the right people, raising capital, sometimes having to let go people, pivot. We did many pivots. A lot of things didn't work, and I think all of this was kind of like what I call the toolbox of skills for investing. And when I did mention it, but when I was around 30 years old and working on Millionaire City and following that, I actually came up with this idea that what if I would be an angel investor? I didn't think about the VC investor, angel investor in gaming. And I figured out that to be a really good angel investor in gaming, I need to be first a founder so I can actually advise people I invest in. I can't advise someone if, let's say, I can't advise someone to play basketball if I never played basketball. And I think the same thing is that I can't advise someone to be an entrepreneur if I've never been an entrepreneur. So I wanted to have that in my toolbox of how to be a successful entrepreneur. And that means all these things I said, like raising capital, hiring the right people, hiring smarter people than you. Sometimes you make mistakes and you have to let them go, pivots and all that stuff. So when I left King, I was creative director after they acquired my company. I felt like my toolbox was ready. I quite quickly made like roughly 20 angel investments, and it's gone incredibly well, that portfolio. And for example, I was the first investor in Huge Games. I invested at 8 million post, and roughly 5 years later, we IPO'd it at 1.2 billion US dollars valuation. I still serve on the board of that great company, but there was a whole bunch of other companies as well in my angel portfolio, and all of those investments I analyzed it, founding team, using the toolbox I had built. So game making skills, founder skills, corporate skills, and sometimes, of course, even help them with fundraising or whatever they needed. And and I think the connected toolbox is key for everything I've done. And it took me 15 years to create that, or let's say 20 years if you take my teenage or childhood years as playing the games. So then it's even 30 years almost of getting that perfect toolbox to be able to do what I do now. And in 2017, 18, I had a friend of mine which I had done angel investment and also consulting for his companies. He sold his gaming company Rocket back to Disney in 2011, and we started discussing on a trip to San Francisco, actually, to the Game Developers Conference in March, that what if we would level up our angel investment and launch a fund? And that fund or that discussion then led to roughly a year later, we started Play Ventures as a dedicated fund by gaming entrepreneurs investing in gaming entrepreneurs. and and there was not many things like that. There was actually, to my knowledge, none which were founded by gaming entrepreneurs. So it was kind of like a, now there's of course other funds like ours, but back then when we founded the fund, we were kind of like a quite a unique proposition. And the first person we went to was my boss from Digital Chocolate, Ilkka Paananen, who then ran Supercell, which is of course at that point, already in 2018, pretty much the hottest gaming company on the planet, following the 10 billion valuation acquisition by Tencent. And we had no slides of the fund. We didn't even have a name, and just the two of us. And he said that if you do this fund, we will invest. So, and that was kind of like that gave us confidence. Okay, now we're actually making the fund. So then we get the licenses here from Singapore, from the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and start fundraising. And that first fund was $40 million.
And obviously, you guys have done first fund, second fund, third fund, and then you have the other two vehicles, which is the opportunity and the future fund. Right now, all in all, how much capital have you guys raised to date for the different funds?
It's roughly 450 million US dollars, and which is kind of, I mean, it starts to be quite a big sum. I remember when I was raising the first fund, I was thinking that, oh shit, 40 million is too much. But over the years, of course, as you kind of get confidence and of course also success and return your funds and all that, it comes and you get a wider team, and you see that, okay, we actually have that competitive advantage we thought we had when we started the fund, and we are succeeding and really, really doing well and paying great returns to our investors. So as we even put on our website, so we returned already our first fund 1.5 times DPI net of fees, and there's I think 18 companies left in that fund. So, and that's a 2018 vintage, putting us to top 1% on card attract funds in the world, even like one thousandths of funds
So when
of that vintage.
so talking about returns here and success on startup investments, what would you say is the one key ingredient that you see in founders? Because I mean, you guys are doing early stage, so it's all about people. But when it comes to people, what is that one trait that you see in founders that you're like, I need to invest in this company?
So often what we look for is it's easy to say great founders, but
Yeah.
it's so much more complex than that. It's We usually look for a dynamic duo, that there's two people, very much like in my own fund. I have it, my partner, founding partner Harri Manninen, that there's two people who they complement each other perfectly. There's maybe one more COO type, the other one is more visionary, able to fundraise, able to inspire people, able to hire people, and the other one is like a pure execution machine. So we often look for a kind of like a founding duo, and sometimes, and this is something I have learned maybe on later years, that it's not that the nicest founders are the best. Sometimes the founders need to make you a little bit uncomfortable. That they're either so freaking smart that you feel uncomfortable, or a lot of kind of very successful people have some kind of like out of the norm traits, and I mean Steve Jobs is a good example of that. But also like Mark Zuckerberg, also out of kind of norm traits, and often we see those in the invest founders we have. So we're looking for a kind of like a founding duo often, or of course it can be a wider team, but there needs to be kind of like at least two people who really gel together, have complementing skills, not overlapping skills, and they kind of know what they're good at and they know what they're not good at. That's a super important thing, because I sometimes see founders who think they're really good at something, and then it's very hard to train them. It's very hard for them to delegate that task to someone else. So really, to answer your question, I think it's this, like, this founding duo worked together before. They have thought about the problem. They want to go and do it better. They maybe have chips on the shoulders from their previous corporate screwing them over money, or something like that, and they want to show they can. And now they have this idea they've been thinking about, and they trust 100% each other, and then they go at it. So that's, for example, we have this company just announced, AppCharge. It's in our second fund, D2C payments company and mobile. We just announced that there was a 58 million round led by IVP from San Francisco, and this company is just our current like biggest rocket ship, and we're the biggest shareholder there. And I remember when I had the first call with the founding team that I love the idea, I love the founders, and they did make me feel a bit uncomfortable because they were so freaking smart, and I had to right after that call I had to go and Google and browse and okay learn more about D2C because I realized that okay these guys are 10 times smarter than I am in this space, and so that's we do not want to invest in founders when we think we know more about the space than them. That's a kind of a
I hear you.
also good rule.
So obviously now, after doing all those investments, starting a successful company that you exited for over 100 million bucks, and then having experience to the corporate side of things, if you could go back in time and give a piece of advice to that younger self, that younger Henrik, that was maybe like entering the venture world, let's say before you started Nonstop Games, how what would be that piece of advice that you would give to your younger self and why, given what you know now?
It's a good question. Of course, easy would be say that go and buy Nvidia stock or Apple stock and don't do anything else.
There you go.
That's a good advice. I actually bought Apple stock 2002 or was it 2003 when I was at Nokia, and then I was like, when they have the iPod and it has 75% market share, there's not much left if you're 75. Of course, little did I know they would do the iPhone, but so I sold. Unfortunately, I did a 3x I think on Apple, but if I would hold it, it would be like absolutely insane now. But anyways, so what advice outside of that I would tell the younger self is that yeah, it's really kind of like the networks you have, which of course school plays a role, but the networks and always kind of like believe in what you're doing and try to find an edge. That I've never, if you're good at something, make it become even better at that. So one of my secret skills, I for example do all the fundraising materials for our fund, so all the slides. And early in my career when I was at Nokia, and this is a little bit of a funny story, I was maybe 24 years old, and every day there was a guy sitting next to me, and I would see the CEO come there. CEO of Nokia would come to a summer intern of 24-year-old or 26-year-old and ask him, are you coming to my barbecue? And hey, high-fiving him. And it's like, I went to him and asked, how do you know the CEO of Nokia? And this was back then, this is like when they had 43% market share. And he said, yeah, I make their PowerPoint slides. I was like, what? So no one likes on C level like to make PowerPoint slides, but if you have really good and sexy PowerPoint slides, everyone thanks you, the CEO. Oh, you have very good slides. So they found out that this one guy sitting next to me, he was really good at PowerPoint and make good looking slides. So I picked up on that, and I went online, learned how to do visual design, how to tell a compelling story. I read books, and kind of like even when I noticed, okay, I started getting good at that fundraising and that kind of material production, I continue to develop my skills, even to this date. Going to the AI tools we have now, maybe make the basic set with that, and then you start pimping it yourself and thinking about the titles. So the advice I would have for my younger self, sorry for the long answer, is that find out what you're good at, and then study even more of that, and try to become even better, because you're probably good at something that you have a tendency to be good at, meaning that you're already better than 90% of people or 99%. And then if you invest more time in that because you have passion and already a good starting point, you will become better than a million people than in it. Or and then continue, and suddenly you're really freaking good or best in the world at something. And people like to work with someone who's best in the world in something, and then you assemble a team with someone who's really freaking good at that, someone who has honed their skills in something else, and that's when you get this type of like all-star team. And that's also what we look for in founders. But that's the advice I would give, in addition to buying Nvidia stock or Apple stock, to my younger self.
I love it. Henrik, for the people that are listening that would love to reach out and say hi, what is the best way for them to do so?
So I'm going to be a very boring VC and say that I'm not active on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, but reach out on LinkedIn, or on my email. So it's very easy. It's henrik@play.vc. And I try to answer as much as I can. I do get a lot of emails, but but tell a compelling story already in subject line, and I try to make time for you.
Amazing. Well, Henrik, thank you so much for being on the Dealmaker Show today. It has been an absolute honor to have you with us.
No, this has been awesome. Thanks for making this, and hope everyone plays more games.